There is a circuit in your brain actively sabotaging your ability to be respected. Evolution put it there 200,000 years ago. It was designed to keep you alive in a tribe of 30 people on the African savanna. Today, it is the reason you finish last. Today, it is the reason people take your kindness for weakness. And today, we are going to reverse engineer it. Let me be clear about something from the start. This is not about becoming cruel. This is not about abandoning empathy or becoming some cartoonish version of an aggressive alpha male. That is just another trap. What we are talking about is understanding why your biological machinery confuses submission with virtue and how that confusion is destroying your life one interaction at a time. You have been told your entire life that being nice is the highest moral achievement. Your parents told you this. Your teachers reinforced it. Society packaged it and sold it to you as the golden rule. Be kind. Be agreeable. Do not make waves. Put others first. And you believed it because you are not stupid. You are actually deeply intelligent. You saw that cooperation builds communities. You understood that empathy creates connection. You recognized that cruelty is corrosive. So you made a choice. You decided to be a good person. But here is what nobody told you. Here is the biological truth that your culture deliberately hid from you because it is uncomfortable. Niceness without boundaries is not kindness. It is fear, and your nervous system knows the difference even when your conscious mind does not. Let me take you back 200,000 years. You are a member of a small hunter-gatherer group. Your survival depends entirely on your position in the social hierarchy, not because you are shallow, not because you are materialistic, but because resources are scarce and protection is essential. If you are too low in the hierarchy, you do not get access to mates. You do not get the best cuts of meat. You do not get defended when threats arrive. You die alone and your genes die with you. So evolution built a system. It is called the dominance hierarchy detection system, and it lives deep in your limbic brain. This system is constantly scanning every social interaction for one question. Where do I stand? And it uses a simple, brutal algorithm. It measures how much you can impose your will versus how much others impose their will on you. When you consistently allow others to violate your boundaries, when you say yes when you mean no, when you suppress your own needs to avoid conflict, your limbic system does not interpret this as moral virtue. It interprets it as a signal. It says, you are low status. You are not a threat. You do not need to be taken seriously. And then it does something devastating. It starts producing the neurochemical cocktail of submission. Your cortisol goes up. This is your stress hormone. Chronic elevation leads to anxiety, depression, inflammation, and a suppressed immune system. Your testosterone goes down. Yes, even in women, because testosterone is not just about muscle mass. It is about agency. It is about the willingness to occupy space and defend your interests. Your serotonin becomes dysregulated. This is your mood stability neurotransmitter. Low serotonin makes you irritable, impulsive, and unable to delay gratification. You become the worst version of yourself. And here is the truly insidious part. Your brain starts creating a narrative to explain why you feel so terrible. It tells you that you are defective. It tells you that if you were just a better person, people would treat you better. It tells you that you need to try harder to please everyone. So you double down on the very behavior that is destroying you. You become nicer, more accommodating, more self-sacrificing, and the cycle accelerates. This is why nice guys finish last. Not because the world is fundamentally unfair, not because women only like bad boys, not because your boss is a sociopath, but because you are sending a biological signal that says you do not value yourself, and other people are simply responding to that signal the way evolution designed them to. Let me tell you what is happening in the interactions you have every single day. When someone asks you to do something you do not want to do, and you say yes anyway, you are not being kind. You are activating your freeze response. This is the third option in the fight-flight-freeze system. When an animal encounters a predator, it cannot fight and cannot escape, it freezes. It goes immobile. It submits. This is what you are doing socially. Your amygdala detects a potential threat, which is conflict or disapproval. It sends a signal to your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus activates your sympathetic nervous system, but instead of mobilizing you to fight or flee, you have trained yourself over years to suppress those responses, so the energy has nowhere to go. It turns inward. It becomes anxiety. It becomes resentment. It becomes that terrible feeling you get at 3 in the morning when you replay every interaction where someone disrespected you and you said nothing. The people around you are not consciously exploiting you. Most of them are not malicious. They are simply responding to the unconscious cues you are broadcasting. When you fail to set a boundary, you are teaching them that your boundaries do not exist. When you apologize for things that are not your fault, you are signaling that you accept blame by default. When you laugh at jokes at your own expense, you are telling them it is safe to mock you. This is not about morality. This is about mammalian social dynamics. Chimpanzees do this, wolves do this, baboons do this, and humans do this. We are wired to test each other constantly to establish and maintain hierarchy. The person who consistently submits gets treated like a subordinate, not because people are evil, but because that is what subordinates are for in primate social structures. They absorb stress. They provide resources. They make life easier for the higher status members. You can see this play out everywhere if you know what to look for. Watch what happens in a meeting when someone proposes an idea. The person with high status in the room will evaluate the idea on its merits. The person with low status will agree with whatever the high status person says, not because they are stupid, but because their nervous system is calculating that agreement is safer than disagreement. Watch what happens when someone tells a joke that bombs. The high-status person will either laugh at themselves or move on without acknowledgement. The low-status person will apologize and explain why the joke should have been funny. They cannot tolerate the moment of social discomfort. Their anxiety spikes. They need to repair the interaction immediately, even if it costs them dignity. Watch what happens when two people want the same thing. The high-status person will state their preference clearly and wait. The low-status person will preemptively defer or create an elaborate justification for why their need is actually not that important. They have internalized the belief that their desires are inherently less legitimate than other people's desires. Let me pause here for a second and ask you a question that maybe no one has ever asked you. What is the worst part of living with this internal struggle? Not what you tell people, but the part you carry in silence. I want you to know something. What you are feeling is more common than you imagine. Thousands of people are watching this video right now carrying exactly the same weight. If you have the courage, leave a comment telling me what is the hardest part for you. Your honesty might make someone else feel less alone today. Now let me continue showing you how to break this pattern. The solution is not to become aggressive. Aggression is just the opposite extreme of the same dysfunction. The aggressive person is also trapped in a dominance obsession. They need to constantly prove their status through conflict. They are fragile. They are reactive. They are exhausting to be around. This is not strength. This is just fear wearing a different costume. Real strength is something else entirely. Real strength is the capacity to hold your position without needing external validation. It is the ability to say no without anger. It is the willingness to let other people be uncomfortable with your boundaries. It is what the Stoics called ataraxia, unshakability, not because you do not care, but because you have decided what you care about and you refuse to negotiate it. This brings us to the engineering. This is the protocol for rewiring the hardware. This is not theory. This is not motivation. This is step-by-step biological recalibration. Step 1. You need to identify your actual boundaries, not the boundaries you think you should have, not the boundaries that would make you look good, the boundaries that reflect what you genuinely need to function as a healthy organism. Start with the physical: sleep, food, exercise, solitude. These are not luxuries. These are maintenance requirements for your nervous system. If you are sacrificing these to accommodate other people, you are already in a deficit state. Your biology will punish you for this with fatigue, brain fog, irritability, and illness. Write down 3 things you will no longer sacrifice. Be specific. Not I will take care of myself better, but I will not answer work emails after 7 p.m. I will not skip meals to make other people comfortable with my eating schedule. I will not cancel my workout to handle someone else's emergency unless it is an actual life or death situation. These are your non-negotiables. Memorize them, internalize them, let them become as automatic as breathing. Step 2. Practice the physical sensation of holding a boundary. This is critical because boundary setting is not primarily a cognitive skill. It is a somatic skill. Your body needs to learn that it is safe to stay present during conflict instead of freezing or fleeing. Start small. When someone asks you to do something you do not want to do, before you respond, take a breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice the urge to immediately agree. Notice the anxiety rising in your chest. Do not try to make it go away. Just notice it. Then speak from that grounded place. Say, I need to think about that, or that does not work for me, or simply, no thank you. The first few times you do this, your nervous system will scream. Your amygdala will fire like someone just threatened your life. This is normal. This is the biological alarm that says you are deviating from your programmed response. Let it fire. Do not try to calm it down with rationalization. Do not apologize for having a boundary. Just hold your position and let the sensation pass. It will pass. Feelings are temporary. They peak, and then they subside. This is how you teach your limbic brain that boundary setting is not dangerous. Step 3. Stop apologizing when you have done nothing wrong. This is harder than it sounds because you have been using apologies as a social lubricant your entire life. You say sorry when someone bumps into you. You say sorry when you ask a question. You say sorry when you exist in a space that someone else wants to occupy. Every time you do this, you are reinforcing the neural pathway that says your presence is inherently problematic. Replace apologies with neutral statements. Instead of sorry to bother, you say I have a question. Instead of sorry I am late, say thank you for waiting. Instead of sorry I disagree, say I see it differently. This is not about being rude. This is about reclaiming linguistic territory. Words shape thoughts. Thoughts shape behavior. If you stop speaking like a person who is perpetually in the wrong, you will stop feeling like a person who is perpetually in the wrong. Step 4. Learn to tolerate other people's disappointment. This is the hardest part for most people. You have been trained to believe that if someone is upset with you, you have failed morally. This is a cognitive distortion. Other people's emotional reactions are not your responsibility. You are responsible for your behavior. You are responsible for treating people with basic respect. You are not responsible for managing their feelings about your boundaries. When you say no and someone gets upset, that is information. It tells you that this person expected you to prioritize their needs over yours. It tells you that they have been benefiting from your lack of boundaries. Their disappointment is not evidence that you did something wrong. It is evidence that you are changing the terms of the relationship. Some people will adjust. Some people will leave. Both outcomes are acceptable. You are not trying to keep everyone. You are trying to keep the people who can respect you. Step 5. Build your capacity for conflict. Conflict is not inherently bad. Conflict is how boundaries get negotiated in any healthy relationship. The problem is that you have been avoiding conflict for so long that your nervous system treats it like a survival threat. You need to gradually expose yourself to manageable levels of disagreement so your body can learn that you can survive it. Start with low-stakes situations. Disagree with a movie recommendation. Express a different opinion about a news story. Send back food at a restaurant if it is not what you ordered. These feel enormous when you are not used to them. Your heart will race. Your hands will shake. This is your sympathetic nervous system activating. Let it activate. Breathe through it. Complete the action. Notice that nothing terrible happens. You did not die. The other person did not die. The relationship did not explode. You simply had a minor disagreement, and life continued. As you build this capacity, you can escalate to higher stakes situations. Push back on an unreasonable deadline at work. Tell a friend you cannot make their event. End a conversation that has become disrespectful. Each time you do this, you are creating new neural pathways. You are teaching your brain that assertion is possible, that you have agency, that you are not helpless. Step 6. Understand the difference between niceness and kindness. Niceness is a performance. It is what you do to avoid negative consequences. It is reactive. It is fear-based. It is exhausting. Kindness is a choice. It is what you do because you have decided it aligns with your values. It is proactive. It is strength-based. It is sustainable. A nice person says yes to everything because they are afraid of rejection. A kind person says yes when they have the genuine capacity to help and no when they do not. A nice person absorbs abuse to keep the peace. A kind person addresses the abuse directly because allowing it to continue harms everyone involved. A nice person sacrifices themselves to make others comfortable. A kind person maintains their boundaries because they understand that a depleted person has nothing to give. This distinction is crucial because it allows you to be generous without being a doormat. You can care about people. You can contribute to their well-being. You can be supportive and empathetic, but you do it from a place of overflow, not deficit. You do it because you choose to not because you are afraid of what happens if you do not. Step 7. Audit your relationships. Look at the people in your life and ask one question. Does this relationship require me to be less than I am? Does it require me to suppress my needs? Does it require me to accept disrespect? Does it require me to perform a version of myself that feels fundamentally dishonest? If the answer is yes, you have 3 options. You can try to renegotiate the terms. You can accept that this is the relationship and stop expecting it to be different. Or you can end it. This is not about being cold. This is about being realistic. Some people are in your life because you have trained them to treat you a certain way. When you change the training, the relationship might change too. Some people will rise to the new standard. They will respect your boundaries. They will appreciate the more authentic version of you. These are your people. Invest in them. Some people will resist. They will guilt you. They will tell you that you have changed and not in a good way. They will accuse you of being selfish or cold or difficult. This is their nervous system detecting that the power dynamic has shifted and they no longer have the same access to your resources. Let them be upset. Their resistance is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you are doing something different. And some relationships will end. This is painful but necessary. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Some people are in your life for a season. They served a purpose. You learned something. Now it is time to move on. Grieve it if you need to, but do not cling to relationships that require you to stay small. Step 8. Recalibrate your relationship with anger. You have been taught that anger is bad, that it is immature, that it is destructive. This is partially true. Uncontrolled anger is destructive, but anger itself is just information. It is your nervous system telling you that a boundary has been violated. If you never feel anger, it means you either have no boundaries or you have disconnected from your body. Most nice guys have enormous amounts of suppressed anger. It lives under the surface. It leaks out in passive aggression, in sarcasm, in sudden explosions over minor things. This is what happens when you do not address boundary violations in real time. The resentment accumulates. The pressure builds. Eventually, it has to go somewhere. The solution is not to suppress anger more effectively. The solution is to use anger as a diagnostic tool. When you feel angry, stop and ask what boundary was crossed. Then address it directly and proportionally. Not with rage, not with cruelty, but with clarity. This person did this thing. This thing violated my boundary. I am communicating that this is not acceptable. If it happens again, there will be a consequence. Then follow through. This is how you prevent resentment from building. This is how you maintain relationships without becoming bitter. You address problems when they are small instead of waiting until they become catastrophic. You treat anger as useful information instead of moral failure. Step 9. Build evidence of your competence. One reason you struggle to set boundaries is that you do not trust yourself. You have internalized the message that your judgment is suspect, that your needs are not legitimate, that you are probably wrong about most things. This is a software glitch created by years of overriding your instincts to please others. You need to rebuild trust with yourself, and the only way to do that is through evidence. Start keeping a record of times when your instinct was correct, times when you knew something was wrong and you were right, times when you set a boundary and things got better, not worse. Times when you said no and the world did not end. This is not about arrogance. This is about accuracy. You need to see the pattern. You need to recognize that your internal compass is functional. As you accumulate this evidence, your confidence will shift. Not the fake confidence that comes from pretending. The real confidence that comes from trusting your ability to navigate reality. This changes everything. When you trust yourself, you stop needing constant external validation. You stop asking permission to exist. You start making decisions based on what you know to be true instead of what you think other people want to hear. Step 10. Accept that you will disappoint people, and some of them will hate you for it. This is non-negotiable. If you live according to your actual values instead of performing for approval, you will make choices that upset people. They will tell you that you are selfish. They will tell you that you have changed. They will tell you that the old you was better. Let them think that. Their opinion of you is not your responsibility. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said that if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. This is the price of autonomy. You will be misunderstood. You will be criticized. You will be rejected by people who preferred the version of you that served their interests. This is not a bug. This is a feature. It is how you filter for people who can love the real you instead of the performance. Here is what most people will not tell you. The version of you that pleases everyone is not real. It is a composite character assembled from other people's expectations. It has no center. It has no integrity. It cannot sustain itself. Eventually, it collapses under its own contradictions, and you are left with nothing but exhaustion and resentment. The version of you that lives according to your values will upset people, but it is real. It has weight. It has presence. It can be trusted, and the people who recognize that will give you something you have never had before. Actual respect. Respect is not something you earn by being useful. Respect is what happens when people see that you have standards and you enforce them consistently. It is what happens when they realize that access to you is a privilege, not a right. It is what happens when they understand that you would rather be alone than be disrespected. This does not mean you become cold or cruel. It means you become honest. You stop pretending that everything is fine when it is not. You stop smiling through pain to make other people comfortable. You stop sacrificing your well-being on the altar of social harmony. You become a person who can be kind because you choose to be, not because you're afraid of the alternative. Let me be very clear about something. This process will be uncomfortable. Your nervous system has been running the same program for years, maybe decades. When you start changing that program, it will resist. You will have moments where you think you are being selfish. You will have moments where you want to go back to being nice because it feels safer. You will have moments where you question whether any of this is worth it. In those moments, remember this: biology is not morality. The fact that your body wants to submit does not mean submission is virtuous. The fact that conflict makes you anxious does not mean conflict is wrong. The fact that disappointing people feels terrible does not mean you should never disappoint anyone. Your feelings are real, but they are not instructions. They are just data. You are not weak because you struggle with this. You are weak because you have been avoiding the struggle. Strength is not the absence of fear. Strength is the willingness to act despite fear. It is the capacity to hold your ground when every cell in your body is screaming at you to collapse. It is the discipline to choose long-term integrity over short-term comfort. The nice guy finishes last because he is trying to win a game he does not understand. He thinks the rules are be agreeable and people will like you, but the actual rules are demonstrate value and people will respect you. He thinks the goal is to avoid conflict, but the actual goal is to become the kind of person who can handle conflict without losing themselves. If you made it this far, I already know something important about you. You do not just want to survive your own mind, you want to master it. This channel is not about magic promises. It is about real people sharing real tools that work in the real world. If this makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel, not because I am asking, but because you deserve a place where you can learn to build the version of yourself you always knew was in there. Biology is destiny until you hack it. This content is produced for educational and entertainment purposes only. The concepts discussed represent theoretical frameworks and should not be considered medical, psychological, or professional advice. Individual experiences vary, and any significant mental health concerns should be addressed with qualified professionals. This script is a work of creative educational content inspired by philosophical and biological concepts.